Rose is your name, but when you poop it sure don't smell like roses. You're number 2, burns the hair in my nose. But we fought hand in paw, now your poop don't stink at all. Now that the air is clear, I'll treasure your front and rear, my sweet Rose.
Instantly neutralize poop stink with Poop Fighter from World's Best Cat Litter for the world's best cat.
Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. Got a great show for you tonight. Here we are, the 1st of October. Hard to believe, but we're already rolling into another month and just a few months left, and we'll be looking at 2016 and already starting to talk about the Ryder Cup next year, and be some interesting conversations, I'm sure, over the next several months. But glad you joined me tonight on Golf Talk Live. I got a special show for you tonight. I've got first upcoming here in just a second after I read all of the opening credits and so forth. My good friend, Mr. Pete Buchanan, is going to be joining me here on a special session of Coach's Corner. Later in the show, I'm going to be joined by Kevin Smeltz, the Director of Golf at Bishopsgate Golf Academy, as well as Dr. Robert Neal, the Director of Golf BioDynamics, and his wife, as it turns out, Karen Harrison, who is also the Director of Health and Athletic Development at Bishopsgate Golf Academy. She's going to be joining us later on in about an hour's time, so make sure you stay tuned, guys. Let me just remind everybody before I bring Pete on live here that we are live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time, or that's 7 to 9 for you on the East Coast, and I believe 4 to 6 for you on the Pacific Coast. Always live during that time slot, and we appreciate you joining into the program. To find us, the quickest way is to go to blogtalkradio.com, and up in the search key, type Golf Talk Live, and that will bring you to the home page. And obviously during the live broadcast, the current live broadcast will always be at the top. But if you're not able to tune in live, no problem. Just go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. And when you get to the page, just scroll down to the on-demand section, and you can listen to any of the episodes that you might have missed, including tonight's episode after the live broadcast. If you want to speak to myself or any of the guests during the broadcast, you can do so by calling in area code 646-716-4667. Again, that number is 646-716-4667. Always love to take calls and hear what your thoughts might be on tonight's program. Or you can also email any questions or comments to me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And also, if you're into golf and feel that you have something that you'd like to share with the audience, you can reach me there if you're interested in coming on as a guest. If you're in the golf profession, whether you're a teacher or somebody in the manufacturing end, or really anything in the golf business, I always love to hear from you. So reach out to me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. I also get updates on Facebook, as where I update the program every week. Go to facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog. Make sure you have blog on the end. And while you're there, please like the page. I appreciate it. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO, and CEO, of course, is in capital letters. And again, thank you for all the recent followers there. As I said, I'm going to start off with the special Coach's Corner segment here with my good friend, Mr. Pete Buchanan, and he is the founder and director of instruction and owner of Plain Simple Golf, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Plain Simple Golf, of course, houses the Plain Simple golf circuit, as well as the Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And Pete has over 30 years in the teaching profession and has done very, very well for himself. And it's really this simplifying method of the golf swing and philosophy that he's been working very diligently over the last 30 years. It's with this efforts that help to make it simple, really, for players to play this game that we all love so well. So, Pete, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Ted, thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. And for those of you that may be joining in for the first time, Pete's been on our Coach's Corner panel many, many times. I always enjoy his thoughts and input to the program. And I thought as we're winding down the season for some out there, especially in the Northeast where it's getting a little cooler, and it's actually a little cooler down here in Florida today as well. I think it was a balming 78 degrees, which is not too bad, Pete, but could be better. But Pete's joined on the panel many times, and I thought that we would have a special session tonight, and we're going to let Pete talk a little bit more about what he does. So let's just jump right into it, about what it is that you do and the plain, simple truth, if you will. And the first question I'm going to ask you, Pete, is really, is the goal of your program really the simplicity for the masses? Is that really what the goal is?
Yeah, that's what our mission is to simplify the game for the masses and to bring, an understanding and a simple process of instruction and a goal-oriented program to them so that they can, understand what they're trying to do and have things that are not only simple to understand, but also very simple to perform.
Yeah, so, sorry, go ahead.
And, when you look at it, a lot of the instruction in recent time is geared off of what the tour players are doing. Well, they already know how to play. So the masses are the ones that need help. They need help. And so that's really where Plain Simple Golf came to be, is to looking at the masses. And I was fortunate enough to spend, 15, 16 years with the John Jacobs Golf Schools and seeing, thousands of people and being able to be right in the mix with the masses and what they're up against. And it was a great thing for me to be able to see all of that and help develop what we're trying to do. And, ironically enough, though, even though I've developed this for the masses, I've got tour players that are loving this also because they like it simple, too. So it's any level of player can do this program. It doesn't matter where they are.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But, you raise an interesting point because and I know, Pete, you've heard this over the years as well, and this is not to really, criticize some of the new technology that's out there or criticize some of the new theories that are out there, but there has been a lot of confusion, and I think anybody in the industry that's being honest with themselves would certainly, I think, acknowledge that there has been a lot of certainly positive feedback and certainly a lot of excitement and buzz about some of the new products and different techniques out there. But there's also been some negative feedback as well, that some things have been made too complicated that the average player or the masses, as you indicate, are struggling with, and they're not at the level of a tour player. So this is where your program really fits in nicely. Certainly it can benefit the tour players, those that are interested, but it's really something that helps the masses out there, and that's really what we want to do in this game.
Absolutely. I'm a big guy on technology. I mean, I use a lot of it, but I think where it's really important to understand is you have to make sure that the technology is one thing that you use to gain more insight on information, but you have to be careful how you present it. And I think that's where the downfall, if any, or the negative side has come, where it's in the explanation of the information. It has gotten a little bit convoluted. So the masses are a little bit taken back by this, and they're, a lot of them are confused about what all the information is. And so we've tried to dive through all of that and then just get down to the simple things that are going to make them better players, not only faster. I've always said when I'm giving a lesson, I want to change the ball flight in 12 to 15 minutes, not 12 to 15 months.
Right.
It shouldn't take that long. And so, there is a process and a goal, but you should be able to get better ball flight right away.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that, and certainly that's not to say that we don't want to develop a relationship with our students and certainly have them come back for additional lessons or additional, work, if you will. But I think if they're not seeing reasonable results in a short period of time, then it creates an aura, if you will, that they're not being properly serviced. And I think that certainly the majority of professionals out there, I think, do a great job. But I think you're right. I think there are those out there, perhaps in the industry, that are caught up in the technology a little bit too much, and maybe not focusing on the results end of it as well. But let's talk about cause and effect a little bit. This is really the relationship between the club and the ball. And there is a relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that. Explain what you mean when you say cause and effect and a relationship.
Well, first of all, when you're looking at impact, the way I was taught to look at it is you look at the club and the ball first and what happens. So there's an impact, and let's just go on neutral. So I'll say correct. For me, that would be the face arriving square, and that would be a face that's square to a path that swings straight through the ball along the target line, and a golf club that moves level through the ball as you hit it. So that would be, to me, a neutral impact. So that's going to produce a ball that flies straight and is hit solid. Now, if you don't have those parameters, now you have to look at when you do get those three things off between the face, the path, and the angle of attack or angle of approach, whatever everybody wants to call it. Mm-hmm. What begins to happen to the ball when you miss those? And so that relationship becomes important, not only in understanding what shots you will see, but how that relates back to you individually and why you produce those shots. Yep. And that's where we take every one of our players, because I want them to fully understand what they're doing, why they hit the shots they hit, but most importantly, how to fix it. How do you go about correcting it so that they can get an understanding of what their club and ball are doing to cause the shots that they see and how they can go about correcting it themselves. Because in the end, I want them to be able to do it, because when I'm not standing there, I don't want them just wailing away without, having any idea what to do. I want them to fully understand what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. And this helps a great segue into what I want to talk about, Pete. So thank you for doing that. It was just perfect segue into this. As I said to you off air, I went on to your website, and we'll give that out here in just a second, but and gathered some information off there that I wanted to specifically zero into, in addition to some things that you wanted to talk. One of the things that interested me on one of the pages was listening to what the golf ball is telling you. And I want to read something out here, and then I want you to respond as you started here just a second ago. One thing is, this is what you wrote here on the article. One thing has remained constant in all the years that I have been teaching golf, and you're, of course, referring to yourself. I have never lost sight of what the golf ball is telling me. It may sound funny to say that, but if you can understand the relationship between the golf ball and the golf club at impact, you're long on your way to improving your impact. So I want you to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, we understand ball flight laws a little bit better, obviously, than the average person out there, because we've sort of had that ingrained into us. But what are some of the things that the average golfer out there can learn from their golf ball?
Well, they can absolutely learn everything. I mean, the golf ball, when it flies in the air, is going to tell them how the club face was when they struck the ball, whether it was open, square, or closed. It's going to tell them what the path of the club was by where the ball's starting and moving along. Although there is a relationship between the face and some starting line also. All depends on the lot that you have, but also the contact. I mean, are you hitting it solid? Are you hitting behind it? Are you, the old laying sod over the top of it? I mean, are you topping it down the fairway? The contact, that's going to tell you what's going on. So you can start to recognize what you see, and I don't want my players to get caught up in what the shape of their swing looks like. I want them to get caught up in what the ball flight's telling them. Now that in turn, once they understand what their impact is and how they go about correcting it, the swing will take its own shape. That'll happen by itself. But I don't want them to ever lose sight of what the ball's telling, because, there's a lot of times, and you and I both know, you take a swing and say, man, that felt great, and the ball's curving 50 yards off into the trees. Yeah. So even though it felt good, something wasn't right. So they need to understand what that is.
Well, and there's a reaction, as you said, a cause and effect to everything. And I think the more people understand what those cause and effects are, the better. In other words, the more information you have up front, especially when you're out working on the practice tee. That's the best place to have that information to work at it till it gets to a point where it's second nature. And then when you go out on the golf course, you don't have to really think about it. Once you see your ball going in whatever direction or resulting in whatever has happened, you'll have a better understanding of what caused it, and you'll be able to correct it very quickly without having to sit and spend hours. And that's one of the things that I think that really, and we'll talk about practice here in just a second, but that's one of the things that always gets me is, somebody hit a bad shot, they don't really understand what caused it, so they start making major changes to how they're handling their golf swing out in a round, and especially if they're playing in some kind of a club tournament or maybe a corporate event, and they'll start monkeying around with everything, and the next thing you know, they're actually instead of maybe just one bad shot, they've strung together half a dozen bad shots.
Absolutely. In getting a little bit back into understanding that, a lot of times when I was teaching the teachers, I did a lot of the training with the golf schools, and I do a lot of training now. And, somebody will hit a ball that, curves one direction or the other. And, and let's say they hit a big slice. And I'll say, well, why is that ball curving off to the right? And this is for a right-handed player. And they said, well, the face is open. I said, but why? Why is it open? You have to dig a little deeper. I mean, just to say the face is open, I think we can all figure that out. But why is it open?
Right.
And so that's the relationship they have to understand. And once they can understand that, there's always going to be an underlying cause. So once you get to that club face won't be open anymore. That's a little deeper. Oh, go ahead.
Right. No, and what I was going to say very quickly was that brings up, really something very interesting. Jack Nicklaus, of course, in my opinion, the greatest golfer that ever lived, and that's not a slam against Tiger. Tiger certainly as well, but I personally have always favored Jack. But, one of the things that Jack was very, very interesting that he said, both in his videos, Golf My Way and Golf My Way 2, is he said that every season, when he would start out a new season, he would go back to the fundamentals. That would be the first thing that he would work on. Is he would work on his grip, and he would work on his stance and posture and so forth. Ball position. That was the things that he would work on, and make sure that he got them back the way he wanted them. And obviously, he would be able to tell by the reaction of the golf ball whether or not any of those things were not in proper sequence. He didn't start Jack Nicklaus never changed his golf swing, to the best of my knowledge, in all the years. Maybe a little bit later on, he might have made some modifications when he had his hip surgery, but essentially his golf swing remained the same throughout his entire career. And yet, how many players do we know have gone and made multiple changes over the years to their golf swing, including Tiger? So this goes to the point I'm making is, I think working with the fundamentals and understanding your grip, your posture, your stance, ball position, that sort of thing, is something that I think all golfers need to spend more time and pay attention to.
Without question. How you start is, a big piece to how the ball is going to behave. I've always said a lot, too. Most amateurs mishit the ball before they ever hit it because they put themselves in an address that isn't going to let them perform. They're actually in their own way. And if you get them to understand why their shots are doing what they're doing, then they won't set up that way anymore. They're going to change it because they're going to get a better ball flight out of it. So it's getting them to understand, what there is a grip, but how does that affect? When you mess around with a grip, what happens to the club face? When you mess around with your stance, what happens to the direction the club swings? When you mess around with your posture, what happens to the angle of attack? Those are the things that are going to give them immediate feedback, but also immediate changes in the results. If they can understand how each of those affects them individually. And the good thing about it is they only have to worry about their own swing. They don't have to worry about everybody else's. They only got to worry about their own. It's the only one they have to worry about. So as long as they can understand their own impact, the relationship between the club and the ball, and I'll give you a little tip. We're actually going to be writing an article soon. We're gonna have a conversation between the club and the ball, and we're going to write an article on if they could talk to each other, what would they say? And so it'll give a little insight to what's going on with the contact. But it's just so important that they be able to understand what the ball's telling them, and I've never lost sight of that because even with everything that's moving, with all these new moves and all these different ground forces and everything that else is coming out. The bottom line is you got to watch what the ball's doing.
Yeah.
And, the masses aren't struggling because the golf courses are too long. They're struggling because they aren't wide enough. It's not the length of the course that gives them trouble, it's the width. And if they can get better control over the golf ball, they're going to score better right away. And they're going to play faster, not going to lose any golf balls, and they're going to be able to zip around the golf course in a lot easier fashion. But when they're hitting them, as I have a good friend down in Florida that calls them foul balls. He says, when I'm tired of hitting foul balls, he's a baseball player turned into a golfer. And I said, yeah, and I agree. Foul balls aren't fun. It's not fun when you're hitting them all sideways, and it's even worse when you don't know why.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is it's like anything. The more education that you have about what it is that you're trying to accomplish and how you get there, the better off you're going to be. And this brings Pete to what I've talked about many times as well as practice. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, should our practice be geared at achieving a goal? Should there be a definite goal that we have when we're setting up our practice sessions?
Without question. Every one of the players that I work with, we look at the impact, and getting the impact correct to what they want is the goal. And so we go through a process of looking at, how do you want the ball to fly? What do you want the ball to do? If you want to hit little draws, if you want to hit little fades, if you want to hit them straight, I'm for one for straight because I like straight, and because I can do it, I like hitting it straight, and I like getting my players hit it straight because once you do find straight, it's easier to find right and left. But what I want them to understand is what is the impact we're trying to achieve, and now let's put together a process so that when you go practice, everything you do is geared toward getting that impact goal correct. Even when you're putting, even when you're chipping, even when you're pitching, even when you're hitting bunker shots, everything is geared toward impact, and all of the drills that you're going to do are going to keep moving you toward that same goal. That way, when you go to practice, you're always working forward. And I always like to say, we're going to put my players on a journey, and when I see them at the start of the journey and then I see them for the next lesson, I'm just going to join them on the journey. I don't want them going backwards. They have to understand where their goal is. Or I don't want them to, they go for a lesson and they get one thing, and the next thing they get another thing. The next lesson they get something else, and you're 5-6 lessons down the way and nothing's happened. So there's a specific goal and then specific drills that go along with those goals to bring them down the road to get them closer to what that ultimate goal and ultimate impact is.
So how do we, and this is sort of the burning question for all teaching professionals out there, whether you're a coach or a teacher or a combination, how do we get our students to practice more? This is something that has alluded, everybody has time restraints and restrictions now. Everybody's busy. It's not like it was, 20 or so years ago when doctors went out every Wednesday and played golf on the golf course, and the weekend warriors went out every weekend. There's lots. So how do we find some balance in order to free up some of that time? What are some options that people have in order to keep themselves engaged in the practice side of things, so that when they do go out and play a round of golf, they're going to be properly prepared? So how do we find some balance in that?
Well, one of the things I put together a 30-day challenge program. And in that 30-day challenge, there was only 12 total hours of drills in there. But I broke the drills down into each area of the game between putting, chipping, pitching, and the full swing. And those specific drills giving them things that they can do. And I think when you break it down in those types of segments, and then you also further gear it toward every one of those drills bringing them towards the goal, I think it makes it easier for them to go out and spend, doing a 15 or 20-minute putting drill or a 20-minute chipping drill, or they're going to go do 20 minutes of pitching, or, spend a few minutes on one of the drills for, the full swing. And I even broke it down that some of the drills they do, they don't even need a ball. So they can do it at home in the backyard. They can do it in the living room. They can do it somewhere else. So I think it's taking the game and breaking it down into segments and making it so that, you don't have to spend forever hitting balls. You just have to spend specific time, maybe 15, 20 minutes in a certain area of the drill, and break the drills out so that, you don't have to be out there the whole time. You can spend a few minutes and go a long way toward what you're trying to do.
Well, and that's and well said. And I think the other thing, Pete, that a lot of people are under a misconception, because I hear this, I'll say, well, you need to work on this, you need to work on. Well, I don't have time to drive. It's 25 minutes to the closest range or to the closest facility, and then it's another 25 minutes back. So that's you're pushing an hour. Then I've got to spend 25, 30 minutes there. I don't have an hour and a half. And what I always say is, and I've said this many times on the program, one of the things that I used to do, and you alluded to it, is I do some of the practice at home. In fact, I do a lot of practice at home. I don't even go out and hit balls as much as I used to because there are a lot of drills and things that I can do in my own house, many of which don't even involve necessarily a golf club. And there's a lot of different things that I think people forget that if they can just I'll give you an example. One of the things that I always did, and you can get one very inexpensive, is go and get a full-length mirror. I'm 6'4", so I try to get one at least 6 foot tall. It doesn't have to be very wide, just enough that obviously gets your whole profile in there. And if you stand back a few feet, you can usually accomplish that. And I will do things. I'll even put some tape, run it down the very center of the mirror, so that I can see where it runs through, and that helps with my ball position and so forth. Also helps me for my rotation and things. But I will do things like that, and I'll do that in the basement or an area of the house that's quiet. Same thing with putting. There's different putting drills that you can do within the house. So that excuse of, well, I've got to drive 30 minutes to the golf course and back it is not really applicable if you do it right, correct?
Correct. I even have a different mirror that I have too, along the same lines. It's a small circular one that they can put behind them, and you can still see the entire view. And I use it quite a bit because I'll set it behind them. I'll put some plane sticks in there so that they can see what's going on. That's something you can do easily in the backyard and just working on, different positions. And so, that's a simple thing to do along those same lines. Yeah, absolutely. There's always a way to get it done. And that's why when I put this program together, when they first said, 30 days, I said, yeah, but there's only 12 hours of drills in there. That's it.
Yeah.
It's 3 hours a week. And that was it. And most of it you probably can do without being at the range. And you'll get yourself a long way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's not to say, I was like many people, and years and years ago, I would go and beat balls until my hands would bleed. And I'd be out in the humidity and so forth. And I certainly enjoyed it. But I learned more by doing different drills. And that's something that I've incorporated into my teaching over the years is really, and that's not to say that some range time isn't important, but I can actually do it in such a way that there's actually less range time, but more drills. And again, going back to what I said earlier, really just with the fundamentals of golf. I think too many people get away from that and forget about how important that is. And it's just with any other sport, there's certain fundamentals and certain things that you have to be able to do. Your swing doesn't have to be perfect. You talked about that earlier. And I've mentioned, again, something else I've mentioned many times. You look at Jim Furyk, you look at Lee Trevino, many, many others out there. Some of the names escape me now, but over the years, that many, many golfers that didn't have a picture-perfect swing were some of the best ball strikers on tour.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was fortunate enough right before Lee Trevino went on at that time, the senior tour, before they changed it to the Champions Tour. He was at a driving range practicing, and I got to sit with him for a few hours and just talk to him, watch him hit balls. This is one of the best things I ever did. Just watching and listening and learning and seeing him hit it and going back on the history of why he evolved to where he was and why he had the swing he did then. It wasn't classic or traditional, but he could get it done. There's one thing that I want to say too about some of these players. It's a line that John Jacobs said a long time ago, and it stuck with me. He said, I can teach you how to hit it like Jack Nicklaus, but you still have to learn how to play like he does. Right. That's true. So hitting it is one part of it. Now you got to learn how to play. And so, there's both parts of that, but you can learn a lot about practicing too while you're playing, Sure. And so that's another way to do it. Because I know a lot of times, you go in the late afternoons, there's not many people on the golf course. You grab a few extra balls. There's where you can work on some things too. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Timing is everything, and I think it's a priority. And I can't emphasize enough. And I've said this as well many times on the program. You have to practice with a purpose
and you have to have, as you indicate, you have to have a goal in mind. You have to say, okay, what's my goal? And that's what I'm going to practice, is achieving that goal. And here are some of the steps. And if you're unclear what to do, you might have played golf for 20, 30 years. Maybe you've taken very few lessons or maybe none at all. I would strongly suggest that you go out and you find yourself a teaching professional in your area, for those of you that are listening, and work with that individual. Find somebody that you're comfortable with, that sort of works well with you and is able to communicate well with you, and that's important as well. I've talked about that many times as well. But you need to find somebody that can point certain things out to you and help put a game plan together so that when you're going, you do have a purpose. A lot of people just sort of flail, that we've talked about here as well as, raking and hitting balls, and that's all they do. And I see that all the time, and it drives me nuts. And Pete, I'm sure you've seen this many times over the 30-plus years that you've been teaching. It's just people doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results. And most of those results end up not being very good.
Well, I've always said a large bucket of balls will lull anybody to sleep. You get a whole big bucket to start going, and and then also too, when you get the driver out, you get the volume turned up pretty fast. I mean, I have a few times I would tease some of our folks, and they'd turn around and say, "What'd you think of that one?" I said, "Well, I don't know. There's 4 of them in the air at the same time. You're going so fast, I can't. Which one do you want me to pick? You got to slow down a little bit here." They just get to wailing away at them. But no, I mean, you're exactly right. There has to be a purpose to what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. If you're going to practice, have a goal in mind. Even if it's like, I'm going to go on the putting green and I'm going to make, 10 6-footers. There's a goal. That's great. Go do that. But to just practice, you actually will just sort of fall asleep and you really won't get anywhere. And it's not going to be as good as if you have a specific goal in mind and then a purpose of practice to go achieve that goal. Right.
And one of the other things, too, that I want to inject a word for those of you tuning into the program tonight, patience. A lot of people get out there and they don't have patience, whether it's in their practice session or even in their round. And the reason why I say that, especially with some of the younger generation, they want to learn everything right now. They want all the information. They want to be able to, and it takes time. Certainly there are ways of improving at a much quicker pace, but it still is going to take a certain amount of time. Some people learn a little faster than others, so they may have somewhat of an advantage over the next guy. But the bottom line is you have to be patient. And there's a lot of people out there that aren't very patient, and they get frustrated very easily. They get out there, they hit a few balls. It's not doing what they think it should or what they want it to, and they get very impatient. And again, they start monkeying around with all the different changes. And that's something, too, especially if you're working with a professional, you need to really listen to what they're telling you. Write it down if you have to. Have them, take video as well. In fact, insist on it. And review that as much as you can, and review some of the discussions that you've had in your different sessions so that you'll better understand what it is they're trying to communicate. And the one thing I would always say as well to students is never be afraid to ask questions. If you don't understand something, you're not going to be any less macho, especially to the guys out there. The ladies seem to be much better at it than the guys, Pete. But there's nothing worse than a guy nodding his head like he gets it, and then walking away after the instructor's left for the day and working on the next student and sitting there going, okay, now what did he say? Or I'm not sure if I understood what he meant. Ask questions. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, it's never a dumb question if you don't know what the answer is. And going back to what you were talking about before, with all the different practice and everything you do in patience, I've always said you have to be patient with golf, otherwise you'll become one. It'll drive you bananas. But, the patience, but it's also a little bit easier to be patient with it if you understand what's going on. I mean, I'd be the first one. If I didn't understand what was going on, it would drive me bananas. I want to know why I'm hitting the shots that I hit. And when you know that, it gives you such a great road and a pathway to fix it. I mean, that's really what it's all about. I mean, I have so many people come to me and say, I have no idea why I hit the shots that I hit. And, that's a darn shame. They should know. I mean, that should have been right away. The people have taken a lot of lessons and no one's ever told them why they do what they do. That's, to me, is first and foremost. first and foremost, why is the ball going where it's going, and what are you doing to cause it? So now we got to fix that.
Right, exactly. The other thing I wanted us to talk about, and I know that you've developed, as you've indicated, a formula for this. And my question is, does a golf swing have a horizontal and vertical movement that becomes necessary for having a good impact and ball control? So what are those movements? I know it's hard when you can't visually see what you're talking about, but can you kind of describe it as best you can?
Absolutely. We came up with a formula for all of the impacts to look at how much vertical and horizontal movement there is, because the ball's to the side of you and on the ground. So you have to have a combination of the two. There has to be side to side and up and down movement. So the trick is, how much of each should you have? So what I started to look at is I looked at, in the vertical motion for me, just picture it at address. And if you were looking down the target line at somebody at address, if you drew a circle around where their hands are, so we'll start there, and then when they get to the top of the swing, draw a circle around where the end of the club is. So that motion up is the vertical.
Okay.
So how the hands swing the club up and the arms swing the club up is the vertical line that we'll measure. Now, the other thing we look at is at the top of the swing, we also look at the shoulders. And we put a line going on the shoulders from one shoulder down to the other, and that's the horizontal. So we look at that number. And so we're looking at the combination of those two to see what's going on. Now, the numbers are obviously based off of 90 degrees, because when you set up at address, the horizontal is nothing and you have vertical. That's all you have. So we based it off of 90 degrees. So let's just say, for an example, here's how this works. So let's say you're setting up at address, and we measure the shaft angle of the club when you're standing there, okay?
Right.
And let's say that's 50 degrees, okay? We'll just throw that number out there. We'll make it easy. So then we take the arms swinging up, and let's say we measure where the hands are, and then we measure up to the top. And let's say that equals 70. So it's a 70-degree upward vertical motion. And then we measure what the shoulders are, and let's say that just happens to be 20, the horizontal. So let's do some math here. So if you take the 70 vertical and add the 20 horizontal, you get 90.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And now here's the kicker. If you take the 70 and subtract the 20, you get 50, which is the shaft angle at address. So what we have found is by looking at those two numbers, the closer we can get them added together to 90, and the closer we can get them when you subtract it to the original shaft angle, the impact changes to solid and straight immediately. So that's the formula we came up with. And so it's real easy to figure out right away which one they don't have enough of. So we do the measurements, and you can start to see. And when you look at the number of 90 degrees, that's why I use 90. If your total is 90 or above, the further away, the higher that number gets, the more, I would say, higher and right your shots tend to go. And the more under 90 it is, the lower and left they tend to go.
Very interesting.
And the other thing is, isn't that interesting? And it works, because it happens every time. You know, we get somebody who has those numbers, and as soon as we get the numbers to match, boom, the ball's solid, straight, boom, and off it goes. But the trick is this. Here's the trick to the whole thing. To make it work completely, this is where and this is a great segue, I'll take your word for it, into my simple swing repeater. The thing that's important at the top of the swing is you've got to take that big hinge out of there. Because if there's a big hinge in there, that totally changes the game. It totally changes. You can have your numbers right, but when that hinge gets up, it all becomes a timing issue to unhinge that back to impact. So now it's still not going to be what you want it to be. So you take the simple swing repeater that I built, which holds the lead angle of the lead arm and shaft in place throughout the swing.
Right.
With that, combined with these numbers, the impact changes immediately. And it goes right to solid and straight. And so that's the big kicker that we put in there.
Now tell me a little bit about, and actually that was a good segue, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you next anyways. Tell us how you came up with the Simple Swing Repeater training brace. How did you come about bringing that to fruition?
Well, after I stopped full-time with the John Jacobs Schools, I really dove into the golf swing, and I wanted to figure out what gives the masses the most trouble. Why do they struggle so much? And so I began to look at the swing, and so I looked at what the hands and arms relationship was. And I thought, how can we make it so that we get the club face so it stays square to wherever they move their arms. Because if we can do that, wow, we've taken a lot of trouble out of their game.
Sure.
And what I found is the more hinging and the more lag and the more the hands are able to move around relative to the arms, the more trouble that club face has. And when you set up at address, you've already formed an angle between the arms and the shaft. And to be totally consistent to getting distance and direction, you need to return to that same angle. Well, I thought if we held that angle in place, it would be easier to get back to it. But if you have a big hinge or big lag in there, then you've got to time yourself back to that position. That's hard to do. Just turn on the television on the weekends. You see all the players that are playing on the tours have trouble doing. Hit two drives straight down the middle, and the third drive goes 50 yards offline. So once we started looking at holding that angle and keeping that hinge and lag out of there, the ball flight just straightened out right away.
And you've obviously worked with a lot of different players and amateurs alike using this training brace. And what's been some of the feedback that you've had?
Oh, feedback has been fantastic. I mean, I think for most of the players, the comments I get most of all are, I can't believe how straight the ball goes. I can't believe how far I can hit it without a hinge or lag in there. Because, everybody says without the hinge or lag, you're going to affect the distance. Well, in our case, we did. It went further. It doesn't go shorter, it goes further because we're shallowing out the angle of attack and allowing the shaft to flex like it's supposed to. But so can't believe how straight they go. I can't believe how far I can hit it. I can't believe how on all the short shots, the ball always goes in the same direction all the time, and I get consistent, solid impact. I'm able to repeat the same motions over and over again. And that's what I continue to hear. They like the repetition, and, for most of them, they just can't believe how straight they can hit it. And, once you take the dynamic of the hands being able to move around from the arms out, now we can control the face, and now it's just so much easier for them to hit it.
Wow.
And I will say this, too, as far as the games go. I mean, we've had a lot of improvement with those that are using it. I'd say probably in a handicap reduction, the norm has probably been between 40 and 50% reduction. Some of them a little bit less than that. I've had some that, used to shooting 100, and after taking the 30-day challenge, we're shooting in the high 70s, low 80s.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And so they're able to change their games very quickly because we take one of the big, and to me, I think one of the biggest causes and one of the biggest things that keeps the masses from being able to hit straight shots is what they do with their hands throughout the swing. If we can minimize that and allow the hands and arms and the club to swing together and then get that golf club to swing parallel to the original shaft angle, it changes the dynamic of the contact immediately. And it's not only in the full swing, but it's in the pitch shots and the shots around the green and putting. And it just gives them a consistent practice that they do over and over and over again. So now when they go practice, they always do the same things. I don't have to worry about what's going on when they put the SSR on. I know they're going to get the results they're looking for because it's going to keep them moving in the direction we want them to move. So that's why I came up with it. I was trying to figure out a way that we could hold that lead angle in place, and a friend of mine helped me develop it. And, we got the prototypes out and we started testing them, and, we all looked at each other like, wow, this really does work. We were skeptical at the start, and I'm the biggest training aid skeptic there is, but it worked right away. And it didn't matter what level of player we put it on. I mean, pro players are loving it because, they can just control the ball so much better. It's just everything flies straight. They're not hitting it all over the place, and they finally get to understand how to swing their arms properly. And that's a big portion. And I know today it's all about ground force, it's all about legs, it's all about hip turns, but the golf club's connected to your arms. Don't ever forget that. And if you can swing your arms properly off a nice, solid, fundamental platform or posture, you're on your way to playing some great, great golf. And I can promise you that.
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about. And I'm 100% behind you, Pete, with that. I think it's, I love, as we talked about earlier, I love some of the information that's coming out there now. And I'm actually going to be talking a little bit about some different things here in the next segment. But, I think sometimes there are certain things that we have to keep as simple as possible. Particularly when you're dealing with the masses. You said it's great to, at the tour level, a lot of them want to get into some of this new age instruction and that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they've already developed a certain skill level, and it's really them wanting to be more competitive out on tour, so they need to have maybe a little bit more of an advantage. But I think for the average golfer out there particularly that's really, really struggling with their game, I think the simpler that we can make it and help them to understand what it is that they need to do, I think is going to help bring some of those. And as we both know, we've talked about this before on the show as well, for years, for decades, the handicaps have virtually been unchanged. And there's a reason for that. It's because the average golfer has just not been able to get it or understand with some of the information that they've been given. And it's not that it's bad information, it's just they've been bombarded with so much. And I'm like you. I mean, I don't mind, there's a lot of interesting training devices out there and interesting, but I think sometimes too much information can be just as harmful as not enough.
I totally agree with you there, but on the other side of that too, when you're looking at all kinds of different ways to swing a golf club, as a player, and I'm sure you did it just like I did.
Sure.
I wanted to be the best player that I could be. I tried everything. I tried everything. A lot of guys will say, well, you haven't tried the way I've done it. I said, yes, I have, because I've tried everything. I looked at every possible scenario you could do, and I could never control the ball as well as I wanted to until I started doing this. As soon as I took the hinge and lag out, oh, my gosh, the control of the golf ball was insane. It was just ridiculous how well I could control the ball and without losing any distance. And that's the key. And I think what people have to understand is, there's a program obviously for everybody, and I want the masses to understand that it doesn't matter what skill level you are, what flexibility you have, what other things you might be worried about with your own individual makeup. Every single solitary one of you with the simple fundamentals can play better golf and improve your golf. The trick is to finding someone who can put you on a path that's going to continue working along a line of a goal and a journey so that you can get there. That's really important. And I think, there's a lot of people out there that can do that for you. I say we because I have some guys that have helped me with this over the years. And most of the program is what I developed. But, I pride myself on the fact that I think I've come up with the simplest way to do it. And if there's a simpler way out there, bring it on, because I want to know what it is. I don't have the only way to do it, but I don't think there's a simpler one out there. I haven't found it. And I went into the direct route of saying, how can we make this as simple as possible for the masses? And we can get them playing better golf right away. And, obviously they need to work at it a little bit, just like anything.
Sure.
I always tell them it's the use of previous experience you have to get rid of. Learning is not hard. Unlearning is. You got to get rid of that other stuff. But when you take something like the training brace that we've built, we can lock a lot of that old stuff out of there right away, because now they can't compensate anymore. So they have to put the golf club in a good spot to swing it with the arms, and it just changes the dynamic of the impact right away. So it gives them the understanding of what they need to do.
Yeah, and well said, Pete. You're right. I'm much like you in the sense that I've tried a lot of things over the years, and I was, earlier on in my game, I was one of those, as I talked about, I think a little bit ago. I was one of those ones that went to the range religiously and would hit a lot of balls. In fact, I when I worked at a golf course at that time, I can remember one of the other pros saying to me, boy, you're back in the pro shop getting some more balls for the range, and didn't you hit two large buckets just about an hour ago? And it just there was a selfish reason too. I just enjoyed watching that ball flight. It was just interesting, and I was kind of like a sponge. When I was younger, I was always trying to learn and see how I could do different things differently, and there was nothing wrong with that. But there was a lot of time that was spent, I'm sure, earlier on in my years, that wasn't as effective for my game as what I've developed over the years. But and that's why when I said earlier, I think that there's a lot of things that you can do at home that don't involve hitting a bucket of balls, and that doesn't mean that you should never go and hit any, but I think you have to find a balance and everything. We only got a little bit more time here, and I want to – something else that caught me on your website there, Pete, that I want to give you a chance to talk about. One of the, I guess, questions that you brought up there, and I'll read a little bit here, and then I'll let you explain a little bit more. But one of the questions on Pete's website was, do you know what your virus is? And I thought that was very interesting. And so let me just read this, Pete, and then I'll get you to respond. It may seem odd to think of what your virus might be for your golf swing, but it is critical that you know what it is so you can properly treat it. I've always related the golf swing to having a cold. When you have a cold, you treat the symptoms: runny nose, cold, fever, congestion, headache, etc. The fact is, until the virus you have goes away, you will continue to have a cold, and you can only treat the symptoms to feel better. Explain a little bit what you mean by that, and how we sort of respond to that virus, if you will.
Well, everybody has. We go back to cause and effect with their ball flight. When it's not correct, there's always a root cause.
Sure.
And so if you don't get to that root cause, there's symptoms that come out. So let's say, for example, I'll take my own game. When I was playing and actually playing pretty good, at the top of my swing, I always had the shaft across my left forearm. So when you put it up there, it always crossed the forearm plane. Because, I was always told the shaft had to be pointing down the target line. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is when I did that big fundamental flaw in there had the face closed relative to my arms. Mm-hmm. So I had to time the downswing to fix that. Once I fixed that little piece, that took away all the other stuff that was in there. So, that's kind of a symptom that was in there. But let's make it even simpler than that. Let's say that, somebody's a big-time slicer because they just can't turn enough to put the club on an arc to make the face square up. Well, most of the time they can't turn because their posture's not right. So no matter how hard they try, if you don't fix the posture, what's going to happen is you might be able to give them a little stronger grip. You might be able to aim them in a different way. But what's going to happen is because you didn't treat the virus, the posture, those symptoms are going to come back. They won't go away. You might make them feel better for a little bit. You can take that little medicine and make that symptom feel better, but it's going to come back because you didn't treat the root. So if you don't get to the root cause of why your ball does what it does, it's never going to go away. You're never going to get there. But the beauty of it is when you get to the root and change it, the ball flight changes immediately. Immediately. I always tell my instructors, always told my staff, if they've hit 5 balls and nothing's changed, you missed it.
Right.
You missed it. Start over. It's okay, but start over. You didn't get the virus. You didn't get the fault. So it's understanding what that fault is that produces those shots. And once you can get that virus taken care of, all those symptoms start to go away. How many times has somebody gone in for a lesson and, boy, they feel really good after that lesson, and they go play the next day and everything comes back?
Yeah.
Well, that's because you didn't get to the root. It snuck right back in there, didn't it? That's because the root cause wasn't changed.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. Yeah.
It does happen, and that's what I'm talking about. So, a prime example that I always saw in getting to the root to make it easier, and I'll just give you a little scenario of a swing. Let's say, for example, because I used to do this all the time, you've got a guy standing there and you say, hey, we'll call him Joe for this reason. Hey, Joe, aim at that 200 marker down the center of the range and hit me some shots. So he sets up and he aims 70 yards left of the 200 marker. Right. So right away, you probably have a pretty good idea of what he's afraid of. He's afraid of going to the right. So he aims over there and hits this beautiful ball that starts 70 yards left and curves way off to the right. Innately, somebody's going to say, well, you need to fix his aim. That's a symptom. It's not the cause. And so what's going to happen is if you change his aim, not only have you not gotten to any of the root causes to why that ball's curving, you might have an easier time in the ring with Mike Tyson now because you got a fight on your hands now because that guy's afraid of going to the right. And if you aim him more right, man, it's panicking now. You got a panic attack going on. The last thing you want to do is change the aim. Fix the reason why it's slicing. So now you fix that, and all of a sudden every ball's flying straight as a string, going 70 yards left of the target. And then he turns around and says, hey, this is great, but my target's over there. I said, hey, let's talk about aim now because now it's relevant. It wasn't relevant before, but now it is. So that's what I mean by symptoms. You know, you can go in and Band-Aid it all you want, but those Band-Aids, even the best ones, fall off eventually.
Right, exactly.
So you got to get to the root cause.
And that's really how – go ahead, sorry.
And I was saying, and if you don't know what it is, you need to find somebody who can tell you. You'll know right away whether you fixed it, because if your symptoms come back, guess what? You didn't get to it, because you should be able to get those out of there.
And that's really, Pete, why you call it plain simple golf.
So, you know, I didn't call it plain difficult golf. That's already out there. I didn't need that.
No.
You know, the club has to swing on a plane, and we got to make it as simple as possible. That's the only way you can repeat it with consistent straight shots. It's the only way you can do it. You can't get consistent straight shots unless you swing parallel to the original shaft angle. Otherwise, it's all timing. I want to take the timing out and just make the ball fly in a simple way right where you're trying to go. Right,
exactly. Now, obviously, you know, some of the stuff that we talked about, particularly with the brace, you know, we can't show that here on this program, so we want to direct them to your website. I know you've got some video there that shows really how that works, and so let's send them to their website for after the show, of course, because I don't want them to leave quite yet. I got another hour program here, so let's not get them to leave quite yet, Pete. But let them know their website, and then we'll talk for a minute or two more before you go.
Well, they can go to plainsimplegolf.com. That's PLANE, plainsimplegolf.com. You can see a lot of what we do with our instruction and some of the things we offer. There's a tab in there for the Simple Swing Repeater. You can see it on there. And the Simple Swing Repeater has its own website, too. We built one for it. It's psgssr.com. But the plainsimplegolf.com website will take you to that to see what's going on with it. So we have different videos. We have different articles that we put out there. I also have, you know, Plain Simple Golf has YouTube. You can go out to YouTube and see some of the videos that we've done and any of those types of things and look at any of the programs that we offer. And we also have, you know, different instructional programs that you'll see throughout there that you can look at.
Fantastic. And obviously through your website, if they want to purchase, they can purchase the brace as well through the website?
Absolutely. You can go out there and click on it. It'll take you right to where you can order one for yourself and all your buddies. So you can get one for everybody. That'd be nice. And also, it's not just for the what I would call the end user, the golfer out there. It's something too that as I understand from talking with you before, that actually some teaching pros have ordered them as well to use in some of their instruction. Correct? Yes, we have. I've had teaching pros actually from all over the world order them, and I've also had tour players that are now starting to order them and use them. So yeah, it's taken, and it's every level of player. You know, it's being able to get some more consistency out of what you're doing. And so yes, indeed. So, and if any of the instructors out there are interested, any of the guys teaching, you know, go ahead and get to me directly, because I'd like to know who you are and talk a little bit about it. So be happy to help you out.
Sounds good. So go to plainsimplegolf.com, and you can not only check out some great instruction, but find out about the brace as well. And you can also order one through there if you want. But Pete's got some great videos on there. He also has a YouTube channel that you can visit as well. I suggest that you go and do that, whether you're a player or whether you're somebody in the teaching profession. A great website. And Pete, thank you very much as always. I enjoyed having you on, and it's like, you know, like I always say, we always seem to run out of time so darn fast on this program. And even though it's a 2-hour show, these Coaches Corner just sort of zip by. And I guess because we're having some great conversation about something we both enjoy.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's a passion to you know, to try to get it to. You know, I feel for the masses. You know, I know they're struggling at times with their game, and I know they need help. And you know, we've put together a program, and you know, I encourage them to go out and take a look, you know, and give it a try. I think you're going to find that it's something that you can easily do, and you're going to find that it's going to help your game tremendously. So you know, I'm just there to help. I also have a video program that I do that you can see out there. You know, I've got players from all over the world sending me videos that I look over what they're doing and send them drills and recaps back. And so that's another way that we can work if you don't happen to be in the area that I'm in.
Sounds good. Well, Pete, I want to thank you very much. As always, I enjoy our discussions, and I appreciate you pitching in on the program, and especially in the Coach's Corner. I always like your input, and I think you've got a great business head, and I think you're also a fantastic asset to this game. I look forward to having you back on again.
Great. Thanks, Ted. It's always a pleasure to be with you. You do a super job, and I like the format that you put together and bringing this type of program out to the people. It's really a great service to them.
Well, thank you as well, and I look forward to have a great weekend, Pete, and I will talk with you next time.
You got it. Thanks, Ted.
All right. Good night. Okay, that was Pete Buchanan, and he is, of course, the director and founder of Plain Simple Golf. Go to his website, plainsimplegolf.com, and you can learn, as we talked about tonight, a little bit more about what he does, and also the Plain Simple training brace as well. You can get your hot little hands on one of those. And he's got some videos there that show you how it works and what he was talking about. And as I said, after the show, I would encourage you to go and do that. I've got three people going to be joining me here in just a second. Let me just tell you a little bit about them. Coming up here on the program is Kevin Smeltz. He's the director of golf at Bishopsgate Golf Academy. And let me just tell you a little bit about Kevin. He is really worked with some of the best in the game, including Nick Faldo, Nick Price, Ernie Els, and Greg Norman, just to name a few. Some heavy hitters there for sure. Also, although he still works with several professional tour players, he has a passion for training and developing junior golfers, which I'm all about as well. Graduated from the University of North Florida, where he received All-American honors. He decided to pursue a career in golf instruction. He trained at the Ledbetter Golf Academy and became an LGA, or Ledbetter Golf Academy certified golf instructor. Served with as David Ledbetter's assistant for a year and a half, enabling him to work with a variety of major championship winners. He then accepted a position as the director of instruction at the Ledbetter Golf Academy in Japan. And after 3 years abroad, he took a position at the director of instruction as well as the director of training and certification worldwide at the LGA World Headquarters in Orlando. And in September 2013, he became the director of instruction at the International Junior Golf Academy in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And this past year, he became a published author. Has written for numerous publications in Asia, Europe, and the U.S., and has starred in videos for Golf Digest. Under his instruction, Kevin's players have won 19 tournaments on the PGA Champions Tour and LPGA Tour, and has taught 2 U.S. Walker Cup team members to number 1 ranked college players, number 2 ranked college player, and many other top juniors. A lot of awards and accolades to Kevin's credit. And, of course, as I mentioned, he's now the director of golf at Bishopsgate Golf Academy. Also joining him is going to be Dr. Robert Neal. He's the director of Golf BioDynamics. Let me just tell you a little bit about him. As I said, he's the director of Golf BioDynamics. Has developed a strategic alliance with Jim McLean back in 2003. His company now provides expert biomechanical services to all of the Jim McLean Golf Schools, and I'm sure you all know Jim McLean. Is based at the Jim McLean Golf School in Miami, Florida during the winter, providing the 3D swing analysis technology alongside some expert golf instruction. Again, lots of accolades as well. And joined by, which I just learned actually today, his wife, Karen Harrison, who is the Director of Health and Athletic Development at Bishopsgate Golf Academy. And Karen originally trained as a podiatrist, studied in Queensland, at Queensland University of Technology in Australia, and graduated back in 1989. Boy, my tongue's tied tonight. Work experience next 14 years was varied and included hospital and community health and private practice settings. With an interest in sports medicine and performance enhancement, Karen attended the University of Queensland in 1997 to obtain a postgraduate degree in exercise science, majoring in biomechanics. In 2014-15, she assumed the role as the Director of Health and Athletic Development with the IJGA team in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and joined the BGGA team for this 2015-2016 season. So let me bring the three of them on, and we'll have some discussion. Good evening, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hey, Ted. How are you?
I'm doing well.
This is Karen.
Hi, Karen. Thank you, and Rob, thank you as well. And Kevin, I believe you're on board as well.
Yes, I am. How are you? Thanks for having us.
I'm here.
Appreciate it. Kevin, I'm going to start just a little bit with you if I can, and then Rob, I'm going to get it to you and Karen as well. So just sit tight for a second. Kevin, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about here was really some of the things that you do differently at the BGGA.
Right. Well, thanks. I would like to just say one thing to start.
Sure.
Obviously, in my bio, I have worked with many tour players, top 10 players in the world on both the men's and women's tour. But working with Faldo and Norman and Els and stuff, that was basically as an assistant for David. So I didn't want there to be any,
Sure.
misconstrued information out there. But I have personally taught men and women both ranked in the top 10. So on to your question. I think the main thing we try to do different at Bishopsgate is try to do things more geared around how to get people to score better and performance. And everyone says that, but
right.
And the trend obviously is going from instruction to coaching these days. And we try to do that. We have a very functional practice facility. Our practice facility used to be an 18-hole golf course with no driving range. And
right.
what we did was, before I got there actually, they took out 9 holes, kept 9 practice holes basically. There's 11 greens, a couple flags in each one. But on the range, there's still trees from the hole, so you can play a dogleg left on the range. You can hit high shots over the trees, low shots under the trees. There's numerous places to hit side hill lies with the ball above your feet and ball below your feet, and things of that nature instead of just the rake and hit, with your alignment stick on the ground, because golf's really the only sport that you practice kind of the way you don't play, if that makes sense. Usually
right.
you play basketball, you do a few chest passes, a few bounce passes, and then you scrimmage,
Right.
In soccer, somewhat the same. So we're trying to make it as much like the golf course as we can, So I think that's the main thing that we try to do to try to change the way we coach here.
One of the things that I've made no bones about on the program, I'm all for technology, and I think there's a lot of great technology out there. But one of the concerns that we've started seeing here is sort of finding that balance for the students. When is too much technology a problem, and when is it not enough? So how do you find balance, and how do you integrate that technology into the academy with what you're working with?
Right, that's a phenomenal question, and a question that goes around these days on lots of forums and blogs and stuff like that, and kind of the new school versus old school. I mean,
right.
Unfortunately, that'll probably never go away. That's kind of like being a Republican or a Democrat. But the technology is mainly for the coach, in my opinion.
Right.
That information's not for the student necessarily, and Dr. Neal would be an expert in talking about that. But I always liken it to the example of if there was a doctor on one side of a building and a doctor on the other side, and the doctor on the left was a great doctor, has a great history of helping people, but had kind of not a lot of great technology or anything like that, and just helped, did a few tests and asked you how you felt, and he gave you some medicine. If it doesn't work, come back and see me again. Versus a doctor on the right side of the building with an MRI, an X-ray machine. I would certainly choose the guy on the right with the MRI, the X-ray machine, and the technology. I certainly would hope he wouldn't ask me explain to me why the MRI or how the MRI makes that image. I don't care who makes the image or what makes the image. I want the most specific diagnosis I can to help me get better faster. So with regards to technology, whether it be 3D or force plates or a TrackMan, I use that information to give me the most specific information I can so I can make the most specific detailed diagnosis to the student. So I take out guesswork. So the idea is to actually make it more simple for the student, not make it more complicated, so we can actually spend more time on the golf course, which is where we need to spend our time anyway.
Right, exactly. Well said. Dr. Neal, I want to bring you in on this as well, since we're on the topic of technology. First off, explain for those out there that don't understand what biodynamics is a little bit, and then some comments just in relation to what Kevin was just talking about.
So Golf BioDynamics is a company that provides both hardware and software solutions for those people who are interested in measuring in 3D what golfers are doing when they're swinging or pitching or putting. So it doesn't just cover long shots or the long game. It can be used in different applications. The part that we also do is provide 3D services. So we can assist the coach in doing diagnoses and then the process of prescribing a pathway for technical development. And that's been part of my role at Bishopsgate, is to work with Kevin and the coaches in determining what the priorities are for the students who are enrolled in that program. And then what I've done also is tried successfully, I suppose, to integrate our technology, the 3D motion capture, with other technologies as well. So with radar devices to measure the ball flight and behavior as well as the club delivery. And just recently we added a pressure sensing mat body track so that you can simultaneously measure the pressure being applied to the ground. These technologies allow you to garner insight into what the golfer is doing very accurately. But the most important thing is to be able to translate that information, firstly into a language that the coach can understand, and then secondly into a language that a golfer can understand. So what I'm talking about there in terms of the language is the feels that they would need to create in their bodies in order to create an altered motor pattern. So the way you use the technology is very different depending on where you're coming into the mix. So a player doesn't, just as Kevin said, doesn't need to know the details of how it works or every degree or every variable that's being measured, but they do need to understand what's important for them, cognitively first, but then importantly what it feels like to do it. And that's where biofeedback training, so giving real-time instant feedback, can help accelerate that learning process.
Do you think, Dr. Neal, that one of the, and this goes to really what the crux of the question that I was getting at with Kevin, do you think that one of maybe the problems with a lot of this technology has been that the instructors have not being able to translate the language, as you put, properly to the end user, being obviously the students, and have gotten too caught up in the technical side of it with those students, and this has maybe caused a little bit of an issue? So is not that the technology isn't good for the instructor to have or the coach to have, but maybe they need to be less technical with their students and speak in a language, if you will, as you indicated, that the students can understand. In other words, they don't need to know how the MRI works. They just need to know what information they can get from it.
I would say that, yes, that's typical and part of the whole learning process of coaching, is that when Rob Neal arrives with a 3D system and you've never done 3D work before, it's pretty daunting that all of a sudden you have these measurements and you're going, oh, that's 78 degrees of upper torso rotation and 13 degrees of tilt, and it's like, oh. And then you get a little bit better and you can remember the numbers and what they mean, and you go, wow, this stuff's really good, and you get excited about it, and you, as a coach then or an instructor, you're wanting to show your enthusiasm to the player and say, you need to have more tilt through impact here. We need to get it from 3 degrees up to 8 degrees, and that might be true in terms of where you want to go, but it's not necessarily a detail that the player needs to know. And so I think that along the way, when you're learning things, you get excited about it, and that's awesome from a coaching perspective. But then until you become really confident in what you do as a coach and how you would use the technology, yes, there's a tendency to slip back into a comfort zone. So you read the numbers out from the TrackMan. Oh, your path was 3 degrees to the right and wrong. Oh, okay, yeah, great. Oh, that one was 2 degrees to the left. That's not particularly helpful for a golfer.
Right.
Because they're trying to understand, wow, what was the feel in my body when I swung to the right versus to the left there? Well, I didn't really feel anything different. So that in essence is what I think the value of a really good coach is that they're able to help the player elucidate those subtle differences and be able to then remember them, both cognitively but really importantly physically.
Right, and obviously the coaches shouldn't fear this technology. I mean, I'm sort of the analogy, if you will. I think it has to be a balance between, good coaching, because obviously at some point you may be in a situation where the power goes out or the batteries die and you have to rely on that. So you have to be a good coach or a good teacher first, and then really the technology is there to enhance your abilities and be able to help relay that information to the end user, again, being the student. So obviously you have to be somebody that's confident in your teaching abilities up front and not use this as a crutch, but really as an enhancement for your teaching abilities, correct?
The best technology in the world isn't going to make a bad coach into a good coach.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So the good
Karen,
coaches with good technology are going to be even better. I'll let you head over to Karen now.
All right, Karen, I want to bring you in here as well, obviously, as the Director of Health and Athletic Development for BGGA. You have really two responsibilities there. One, obviously, is the health and well-being of the athletes that are attending there. Talk a little bit about what you specifically do at BGGA, just so that the listeners have a better understanding.
Well, I think in the first instance, I'm overseeing their physical training and trying to just further develop the program that was already in existence. Importantly, I want to, for the coaches and the students, really have them understand the link between the physical training and becoming a better golf athlete, and having those qualities enhance their technical progress. So, for example, many of the students that we have between the ages of 14 and 17 are undergoing growth spurts. They're all getting taller. So consequently, we have a number of flexibility issues that are apparent. So one of the things I want each of the students to understand is that we don't do a group stretch at the end of a class. Each of them have their own stretches that they need to work on to improve their flexibility in a very specific way, and that they should all understand now after our team meetings, where we've all sat down together with coaches and myself and the mental trainer. They should all understand what they need to do differently in order to improve technically. So it might be that being very tight into internal rotation at the right hip, if they're a right-handed golfer, might really affect the quality of their loading pattern as they turn back. It might cause them to have a very short hip turn. It might cause them to sway or reverse, so that the body tends to compensate if it can't get into a certain position. So I think just having the students understand that their physical status and their training is very important and links closely with their technical is something that I wanted to introduce. And then I wanted to spend time on the range with the coaches and really have them feel that we're bringing the physical training out to the range as well. Because my background is in the 3D and the biomechanics. I've done a lot of training with coaches at the coalface, teaching people how to change their movements. So I'm looking to introduce a few different things to the program here.
Now, one of the things, Karen, that sort of piqued my interest in your bio is that you're currently studying to earn your diploma in sports nutrition, which is a program that you're doing actually through the International Olympic Committee, IOC. This is something that you're obviously looking to integrate in BGGA as well. How important? Explain for those out there that haven't really gotten bitten by that bug yet, how important nutrition is as well for the athletes.
Well, it's absolutely vital, the fuel that we put into our body. So I think in the first instance, simply educating our students about what it means to be a healthy eater, what it means to have a balanced meal in front of you, food that isn't highly processed, and the health benefits that can result from all of that. And then we get more specific into, what does the athlete need to do differently to perform optimally? So it might be as simple as how much do we need to drink out on the course? Do we drink water? What are the benefits of having Gatorade? Is there too much sugar in it? Or could it be beneficial if they're lacking in fuel and they need some carbohydrates? So part of it is about nutrient timing, how much. It might be, I had a young student ask me today, he's 21 and wants to put on some weight. So what does he need to do differently? So we might look very specifically at how much protein he's consuming during the day, when he's consuming that protein. Does he need to perhaps take a supplement? And then how do you navigate that? You go into the GNC store, and there are a million things on the wall to choose from. How do we choose a good supplement? So helping them navigate those sorts of questions and issues.
For some of the average golfers, especially some of the older golfers, I think the younger generation is more apt to follow that regimen, if you will. I think because there's so much information now being made available, particularly through other sports, and now it's being infiltrated into golf as well now. But for some of the older golfers out there that maybe haven't gravitated as well, why is it important for them? Obviously I know the answers to it, but I want you to maybe articulate, Karen, a little bit more, because obviously when they're playing 18 holes out there, they need to have consistent energy throughout their round. So why is it important for them to adhere to a good nutritional diet?
Well, apart from the basic health benefits, I think that if people are heading out to play a round that takes somewhere between 4 and 6 hours, perhaps, depending on whether it's a private course or a resort course, things can take a little bit longer. Your body needs fuel to perform optimally. And if you run out of carbohydrates, which are your primary energy source, then that's going to have you feeling very fatigued, and it will affect your concentration, and it will affect your swing. It'll have you just feeling like you can't finish the round as well as perhaps you started. And the same goes with hydration. So you just have to be perhaps 2 to 3% dehydrated for that to affect your fine motor skills, your ability to concentrate, the body's ability to thermoregulate. So you're more prone to heat illnesses, heat stroke, if you're not drinking properly.
And it's also it's not just the physical side; it's the mental side as well. When that happens, and they're not adhering to a good nutritional diet, or they're not hydrating properly, once the fatigue starts heading in, then it affects the mental side of the game as well. Correct?
Absolutely. So there are times when, if we don't have food on the course, then perhaps something like a Gatorade may be helpful. They've actually done some very interesting studies with runners and cyclists to show that there must be some sort of connection between the mouth and the brain, so that we've had cyclists who've taken a sip of Gatorade, swirled it around in their mouth and spat it out, and they can exercise for longer than the cyclists that don't. So the brain's obviously got the message that, there's fuel coming, keep going.
Right.
So sometimes you only need a very small amount. It's not that we need to consume on the spot a big Gatorade that contains 32 grams of sugar.
Right.
Which is probably going to have us spiking and then not feeling so good about 20 minutes later. So there's a smart way to do it.
Right. And probably, and I'm sure a lot of club owners out there that are listening to the program might not agree with this, but obviously eating a hot dog and maybe having a beer at the turn is probably not in the club golfer's best interest. That might be something maybe for the 19th hole, correct?
I would say so, yes, but that might not change anyone's view, me saying that.
No, that's true. Well, it raises a lot. I mean, obviously the health benefits far outweigh, and really is the most important thing. I think we all have to be more diligent in how we treat our bodies, but it's never more important than for those that want to be good stewards of their body, but also that want to play sports, whether it be golf or some other sports. And a lot of people think, for years golf was never considered to be much like some of the other traditional sports like rugby or football or soccer and things like that, where there was a lot of running and a lot of physical activity. But playing 18 holes and being out there to 4 to 6 hours, as you suggested, does take a certain amount of fuel in your body, and once that sort of lethargic feeling starts to take place, the damage has already been done, and it's very difficult, especially once you've made the turn to recover.
It is very difficult to recover, and it's a little bit like in other sports, like marathon running or cycling. We often hear about athletes hitting the wall.
Right.
So what that basically means is we've completely run out of carbohydrate stores. And basically people fall over and collapse on the spot. They can't keep going. So, a sport that's a little bit more intense physically, it's a little bit more dramatic, of course. But it's the same kind of idea. Basically, our body isn't going to run on no fuel. A little bit like our car. We have to put fuel in it for it to go. The same thing with our body. So I think for many of us as we get older, we start to get a little smarter about what we eat, and we start looking at putting a little bit more real food perhaps on our plate. And as some of the real food advocates talk about, they say, shop the perimeter of your grocery store. Don't shop the middle aisle. There isn't much real food there.
Yeah, that's true. Karen, I would love to actually have you back on specifically just to do a whole segment on nutrition, because I think there's a lot of people out there. I obviously don't have time to do it all tonight, but I know there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from some of your knowledge there. So I'm going to invite you back now at a later date to come on and talk about that. And I hope you'll take me up on that, because I think it would be a great benefit to many of the listeners, not just the average golfers out there, but even some of the teacher professionals that are tuning in tonight, listening to the program. I think they would benefit from that knowledge that you're offering now.
Well, thank you. Of course, I'd love to come back any time that works for you.
Perfect. Kevin, I want to come back. I didn't forget about you. Let's talk about a typical day. What does it look like for the students that are attending Bishopsgate Golf Academy?
Right. So they have school in the morning, academic school, and then golf in the afternoon. So they wake up, eat breakfast, get on the bus to go to the Montverde Academy, is the academic school that they go to. It's a pretty well-recognized prep school in the Orlando area, not only in academics, but interestingly enough in sports. They've been the number one ranked basketball team in the U.S. 3 years. I think 3 years out of the last 4, but for 3 years. Number one ranked soccer team for 3 years, and the boys and the girls for 1 year as well. So, and obviously these days they've got a lot of great golfers that go there as well. So hopefully they bring home a state championship there also. So they get on the bus usually about 7 o'clock. They go to their classes. They leave school around 12:05, get back about 12:40, 12:45, eat lunch, go take a break for a few minutes, get changed from out of their uniforms, and then to golf practice. Golf practice starts at 2 till about 5:30.
Wow.
Usually goes till maybe 5:30 or 6. Karen actually has one fitness class from 1:30 to 2:30. The others start golf about 2 and go to 5:30, like we say, 6. Then obviously they go to dinner. Some still have fitness. Karen can go into the fitness schedule if you'd like.
Sure.
And then they eat dinner, study, and do it all again. So it's a busy day. They're very dedicated. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of hard effort, and but that's what it takes in any endeavor, I think, to achieve your goal. So it's a long day for them, and sometimes it's easy to take for granted how hard it is. We can only see them for half a day, but they're very, very dedicated and want to achieve their goals.
Karen, can you elaborate a little bit on the fitness side of things? I know that that's another area of your expertise as well, and besides the nutrition, but the fitness end of it as well. Talk a little bit about what the students can expect working with you.
Well, we're at the beginning of our semester, so it's a little bit about getting them into a routine in the first instance. We have 3 sessions a week for each of them, and if they want more, we are absolutely open to that. The sessions are around about 1 hour duration, and they're structured in a way that we teach them a dynamic warm-up to begin with. So very important to make sure we're warming the body and the mind up for the activity to follow. Helps prevent injury and means that we get the most out of our exercises. I would say that at the moment, a large portion of our class is devoted to conditioning, which is very important. And secondly, I would say teaching them basic technique and posture for a lot of very fundamental movements. Bending, squatting, lunging, all of these sorts of things that are important in the training environment. We talk about physical competence and developing physical literacy. So we need to ultimately have them maintain technique and posture under fatigue, under load, under speed. So we're really putting the fundamentals in place now, and we'll start ramping that up again shortly. So there'll be a little bit of resistance work, there'll be a little bit of plyometric work, and we make sure we have a pretty good stretch at the end of the class, and we're trying to individualize that as much as possible. It's certainly hard work at the moment because a lot of this is done in the heat, but at Bishopsgate we're looking forward to getting a more air-conditioned facility to work out in.
I'm sure the students appreciate that. I'm sure the students appreciate that. Karen, let me ask.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, let me ask you as well, because I noticed this something else in your bio, and I want to know if this is incorporated into some of the fitness training as well. You also study and do yoga as well, and I've heard a lot more people are getting into yoga. Is that something that you're incorporating at Bishopsgate? And if so, or if not, rather, is this something you're planning to? And what are some of the benefits, do you think, that yoga can bring to help someone's golf game?
Well, I should state right off the bat that I am not a yoga instructor, just a yoga devotee. So probably for the last 20 years, I've attended classes myself. So I'm a firm believer in the benefits of yoga, the benefits of the breathing technique, of staying flexible, of being very aware of posture and movement and control of movement. So I think there are some tremendous benefits, and a lot of the postures that I've often used in yoga, we will use in class. I would love to take the students through some yoga classes, and in fact we did do a little bit last year at IJGA. It certainly can be very relaxing. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you can work very hard in a yoga class too, so it really depends on what form of yoga you're teaching or taking. But I think as part of an overall training program, it can be very valuable for some people, but it wouldn't be the only thing that I include.
No, but this is something that, as I mentioned, either currently or planning to maybe at some point implement at Bishopsgate.
I would like to have as much variety in the program there as possible. So if we have a few yoga classes at some point, I think that would be great. It would be nice to think we could actually get a yoga teacher in on a regular basis as well, which is how we managed things last year. So find someone who's more expert in me than actually in delivering the class. So if certainly we had the interest, I would definitely look at doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Dr. Neal, I want to ask you a little bit more about biodynamics, and I want to talk about the process here with you, how long it takes for the instructors and what information they can gather. So let's talk about the process. How long initially are the sessions take, and how long for the data that they're collecting off that? Normally, how long does it take for them to get that information, and then before they can end up putting together a game plan, if you will?
The process of data collection takes approximately 20 to 30 minutes. That includes the time to put the sensors on, collect data on at least 2 clubs, typically a mid-iron and then a driver. And then I would say probably within another 5 minutes, with an experienced operator like me or Nate Doherty, who's also working at Bishopsgate, we can have a diagnosis of the most important things to work on technically. And so if it's the coach's intention, you could immediately begin the coaching process. But typically 40 minutes, and all of the data are available then. It's a real-time process. It's not like you go to a laboratory, you put these markers on, and it takes hours to collect the data and then synthesize it and then do up the reports. It's all pretty much available immediately. I mean, Kevin would have the coaching insight or the perspective on that if you wanted to check that out with him.
Sure. Kevin, talk about from the coach's perspective, if you will. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Neal. Kevin, talk about from the coach's perspective what, Rob alluded to this a little bit earlier in his comments about the information, obviously, that the coach gets from this data and then translating it to the student. What does the student get out of it?
Right. So, Dr. Neal could tell you how many graphs. I mean, you could get any number of information he could calculate for you in any certain way. But typically, I look at the report that comes out. It's with certain parameters on it, and it's a little bit like a blueprint. So there's a corridor. So if your pelvis is bent forward between 13 and 26 degrees, let's say it's 20, the number comes out green. It says 20 and it's green, if that makes sense. So there's kind of green, yellow, red numbers. So typically, I just go down the summary, and Dr. Neal's done a great job in putting probably the most important areas, the most important simple areas on what needs to be done. So posture and how your pelvis is, the angle that it's turning on, and how much turn that it has, and the same thing with your upper body, and how much shift you have forward, et cetera, et cetera. And I usually go down. It's pretty easy to go down and pinpoint the areas that are in the color red, because that would obviously be well outside of the corridor. And then through experience, I've done this for 20 years, not in the 3D realm, but in coaching golf, I can kind of put together and try to piece together, okay, if he's got this much turn, if he's overturning in his backswing and he's not shifting, then this is going to happen. This is going to happen to his club, and this is why the path swings too far either to the right or to the left, and that's why this shot shape comes out. So you're always trying to relate it to the ball, right? That kind of gets lost in translation sometimes, so to speak, that it's the ball and the angle of attack and the divot pattern and those things that you're trying to, whether it's deep or shallow, and whether the ball has too much backspin or not enough backspin, or whether it's curving right or curving left. So you're always trying to relate back to that and relate those things back to impact. What does this person's impact need to be like when he leaves this session or this week or this semester or this year in order to give him the best opportunity to play better? If he needs to hit it higher with more spin to compete in the bigger tournaments that he wants to play in, how am I going to do that? And I can look at the data and say to myself, okay, he needs to hit it higher, so his angle of attack needs to be shallower, his right side needs to bend a little bit more coming through, and it needs to open. And then I can say whether I want to do some sort of random practice or block practice, and that's up to me to decide, right? That's up to me to decide how do I want to get this person to do it. if I take a girl named Ji Young Lee that plays on the LPGA Tour, I'll just tell her to hit it over a tree. And I'll stick her in front of a tree all day and tell her to hit it over it. And if I'm teaching Charles Howell wants to know a little bit more of how am I supposed to hit it over this tree. So that's getting to know the player, getting to know the person, and the route to take to help them improve the fastest, so to speak.
So walk me through the process then. If you have a new student that's coming in, let's say, is this something that you're going to hook them up to this process right away, right from the get-go, or is it going to be more like a traditional session where they're going to, maybe hit some balls first and get an ID visually, and then you hook them up after? What's the process that you normally do with this sort of system?
Right. So obviously, when we have the juniors here for the full year, it's a little different. But in the normal golf instruction scenario, let's say, or if someone comes for an hour or two, I'll have them hit balls normally. I'll observe, okay, what does the ball flight look like? Is it going high enough? Is it solid? Is it on the heel? Is it on the toe? Is it consistent? Is it inconsistent? And then kind of interview them at the same time, right? Like, okay, what do you feel like you need to do to improve the most? And sometimes perception is reality. They don't really know, depending on the level of the player. But just interview them. Do you have any injuries? What's your history in golf? How good have you been? How good do you want to be? How much time do you have to practice? The normal questions you would ask to try to make a little bit of a plan for them. And obviously, I'm at the same time, I'm taking kind of a soft look, okay? Like, what does this guy's body or this girl's body motion look like? How's her club swinging? What's her club face look like? I'll look at it from down the line. I'll look at it from face on. I'll go to the rear, behind the player. A lot of times I'll film them from over the camera, so I'll stand out in the range and put the camera on it, and obviously I'll move out of the way, which I guess is an important point for the listeners to hear.
Sure.
But then they'll hit over the camera, and that's a great angle because you can really see what the body's doing and how the club's releasing and how the shaft and hands are moving through the ball because the right side of the body's not in the way, so to speak. So I'll do that, and then I'll get some TrackMan numbers typically. Hook them up to 3D, and then it's my responsibility to take all of that information, digest it as quickly as I can into a story to tell them and give them the least amount of information as possible to make the biggest change in their golf swing or putting or bunker or whatever the case is.
Is there a time, Kevin, and I'm going to ask this to you, Kevin, is there a time when maybe this technology is not going to be beneficial? I'm going to give you an example. I'll set up a scenario, and then I want you to respond to it. Obviously, the information that you're gathering through this process is going to help to create your ideal swing. But let's say if you took a player like a Lee Trevino as an example, whose swing was very unorthodox compared to what you're seeing now on the tour, some of the information that you might get back through the biodynamics process is going to be a little bit different than what you might say with a Nick Faldo or Nick Price or some of the other players. If you have a player that comes to you that obviously has specific needs, but maybe is still a good ball striker and a good player, is this going to be able to? Are you going to be able to get information from there that could help with that situation, or is it going to maybe create a situation that might create problems? Does that?
Well, I would like to hope with my experience that it wouldn't create any problems, but but there is the personality involved too. So you take someone that's fairly analytical, and they need that information to learn, but that doesn't mean that that's really right for them to tell them everything that they want to know either.
Right.
So that's for me to decide. I'll put people on force plates. I'll put people in 3D. I taught Andy Bean for 7 years, and I never videoed him once. He didn't want to know what it looked like. He's a good friend. Actually, I take that back. I did film him one time, and I didn't show it to him. He was hitting it so good, I just kept it. So that's up to the coach. There are times when I wouldn't do that. Andy Bean's a bit extreme for what I would normally do, but in 7 years I videoed him one time. So.
Right.
May I make a comment in there, Kevin?
Sure.
Of course.
I would think that there are times in someone's career where making changes are appropriate, and maybe it's major changes. There are other times when it's not. So if you already have a player with a very, very well-learned motor pattern, I think it's ill-advised to say, well, this doesn't fit the model that I have, I better go and change it. Because I think the chances of you making that person better as a consequence are pretty small.
Right.
My view would be, well, let's measure this person, the Lee Trevino, when they're hitting the ball or performing as well as they ever have, and we'll use that as their gold standard, so that if they diverge from that, we have somewhere to bring them back to, rather than saying, all right, we always move someone to this model because it suits us. So that would be my interpretation as well.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I've actually used it for that before as well, for some of the players. One LPGA girl I teach in particular, I've actually done it that way with her too, right after she won a tournament. Because she's obviously going to be hit it pretty reasonable. Let's collect this data, and if we get off base, we've got some data to go back to that she liked, and the results were there as well.
And typically, if your sessions are, let's say, overall an hour to gather the information that you need, how often are you comparing that data? Let's say with this student, the LPGA player, as an example. Let's say you've got their ideal data together. How often are you putting them through this process to check that data? Is it on sort of is it at your discretion, Kevin, as an example, or if the player starts having difficulties, is this something that you want to get them back into right away to take a look at what's happening now, as opposed to say 6 months ago? How do you sort of decide how often you want to utilize this information?
I like to have a bit of a plan to do it. 2, 3, 4 times a year. But that timetable kind of flows a little bit, obviously, based on performance, things of that nature. If I'm scheduled to do it the second time and they're playing great, and I know kind of I can never see in 3D for sure, but I kind of have a gist of what it looked like on 3D the last time because I have the report, kind of compare it. It's going to be pretty reasonable. That person feels like they're hitting it pretty good. I might decide to not do it at that time, but certainly the beginning of every off season would, no ifs, ands, or buts, I would do it then.
Right.
And then maybe at the end of the season.
But you raised a very interesting point early on in the discussion, and I want you to maybe, if you can, expand a little bit. You talked about how you visually watched the student. There were certain things that you asked, and that long before you put them on this equipment, if you will. One of the points I was getting at earlier about the technology is I think that some of the instructors out there have misunderstood the appropriateness, if you will, of this information, and they've gotten to a point where their eyes are constantly looking down at the screen or the monitors, and they're not really looking up, or they're not really focused on what's happening. They're too engrossed in the numbers. How do you, as a coach or as an instructor, find that balance? And obviously, it's going to be different for each one, but in your own experience and at Bishopsgate, what do you try to instill with the coaches there? Is it sort of everybody sort of does their own thing or what they feel comfortable with, or is there sort of a what you feel a successful model for a balance between the visual aspects of coaching and teaching to incorporating technology?
So what we're going to do this year at Bishopsgate is we did an initial assessment, which took about a week. There was a 3D assessment, a TrackMan combine, which we kind of, you can design your own. We kind of randomized it a little bit with different clubs to try to make it a little bit more like the golf course. We had a shot shaping section, a short game skills assessment, a putting skills assessment, a mental assessment, the physical assessment. So we did all of that. We'll do that at the end of the fall semester, and we'll do that at the end of the year. So that's sort of non-negotiable.
Right.
The other parts of the year, it's basically we wouldn't really do much 3D then, just from a time standpoint. So the coaches have their blueprint. There's a lot of research out there that shows how long it takes a lot of people to change a motor pattern. So it's not as if it's going to change overnight or in the first week, especially if you've got school to study for and SATs and tournaments to play, et cetera, et cetera. On a slightly different note, but the same topic, what I thought you were actually going to allude to, which I think is a good question. how does a coach or an instructor keep their eye sharp? You know, you kind of alluded to sometimes they'll just look down at the screen. And what I try to do that is I watch and I try to guess what the 3D is going to say.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
So that keeps me really sharp, because there's certainly times when it's even with a video camera. You know, when I was younger, I would just, as I would do it, I was like, okay, I'm going to take this guy in the video room, I'm going to video him, take him in the video room, look at it, come back out, probably video him again. And next thing you know, you walk into the video room with him the first time, you're like, I haven't even looked at this guy. I just watched this ball fly 20 times and I didn't even look at it. So your eye can get dull if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
So you've got to keep your eyes sharp. And I try to guess what's going on in the 3D, because if I go to a tournament with a tour player, guess what I don't have? I'm not going to take a TrackMan, and I'm not going to take, some of the other equipment that is so useful, but I'm not going to take that in a tournament situation typically.
So it boils down to a discipline, if you will, for the coaches and instructors. And again, the equipment, as good as it is really there to provide them with data and information to help them make, if you will, good decisions on how they're going to handle those particular students. The reason why I ask this is again, I'm certainly not against the technology. But as I'm sure, Kevin, you can allude to, and Dr. Neal, I'm sure you've seen it yourself in many of the different forums and discussions that go on out there. There are those out there that have relied so much on the technology that they've kind of moved away. They've untrained their eye to a point where the technology and what it's done is it has sent a message out there. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is how do we as instructors, coaches, what have you, and even those in the technical side of things, how do we put perspective back into it and say, okay, this information is here to help you, but at the same time, we don't want you to negate really what it is that you're there to do, and that is to coach and teach this game. And Kevin, Karen, or Dr. Neal, either one can answer that.
I'll chime in here because there's been an initiative started at Bishopsgate this year by the owner to create a Coach Performance Institute in which we look at holistic coaching.
Right.
And technology is certainly a part of it, but it's about 1/10 of the whole coaching paradigm. And so if our focus is to create golfers, then we don't need to be biomechanists, we don't need to be exercise physiologists or sports psychologists. What we need to be is coaches, and that means that we need to understand the fundamental sciences on which coaching is based, and then we need to be reflective in our process. We need to understand what good coaching is and the process and how we can interact with teams of people and the players. So I take my hat off to the owner of Bishopsgate who set this up to ensure that the coaching that's delivered at Bishopsgate is going to be the best in the world. And I'm fortunate to be involved in setting that up with Andrew.
Fantastic. Let me ask you one further question, Dr. Neal, on the topic of technology. Obviously, what you've put together with this program and the software is obviously first rate. What's next? What do you see or what do you envision the next step or the next phase? Obviously, technology changes, as we all know, very rapidly. Where do you see this progressing from that standpoint?
I'm hopeful that it's not too far down the track where the technology will be wireless in a way that you could actually play golf and have good measurements of what your body is doing as you're playing golf. And I think that's really the ultimate in terms of taking the technology which 15, 20 years ago was only ever done inside the laboratory. These days we do it on the range and off grass, outdoors, and then we're right at the very, very edge of taking technology now onto the golf course. We'll do some of that at Bishopsgate this year with our wireless system. It's not a simple process yet, but I think as the wireless world and technology in that area continues to improve, I think that it could become a real possibility where coaches would ask their players to wear it on the golf course and then really find out what their biomechanics is about.
In other words, the coach can get real-time data of their players while they're out there doing it. Do you see an issue, obviously, during tournament play that might be an issue where it would give somebody an advantage, or I guess if everybody's doing it, but is that something that you see that the governing bodies might say, well, we don't know if we want to have players doing that during a tournament, or is that maybe just for like a Pro-Am part of the event?
Yeah, I haven't thought deeply about it, but clearly there are implications that way. If they get to the stage where the technology is wearable unobtrusively and real-time data could be streamed back to somewhere, then I'm sure the governing bodies would want to say, hey, no, we might like to have that information just as the viewers get on TV, get the information that Charles Howe's pelvis rotation speed was X on that screen there, just like his club path was such and such, or his speed was such and such. I think that from a viewer's perspective might be wonderful information, but I can't imagine that they would allow or would want to allow that to be fed back to the players. I mean, as a player myself, I wouldn't want to know about that stuff while I'm trying to play tournament golf. But
no.
I'd like to tell the other players what theirs is.
Yeah. Well, you know, the reason why I say that is you never know. You might get some sort of cross, especially with wireless technology. You know, Charles Howell might get. On the other hand, it might work to his advantage if you got Jordan Spieth's, crosshairs. That might work to his advantage. But you know where I'm going with that. That's obviously something that. I remember back 15 or so years ago when they talked about square grooves and the wedges, and it took them forever to make decisions on that. And then, so obviously technology is changing, and it is very exciting and very interesting. And I'm glad it makes me feel good to know that you guys are using it properly, because as I alluded to earlier, there is a lot of chatter out there in the industry about technology, and I think it's good and important. I think that we have it, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. But at the same time, I'm glad to see that you guys, Kevin and Dr. Neal and Karen, are using it in an appropriate manner. I think it's something that is definitely needed. Golf has to progress like every other industry out there, but at the same time, it has to be put in its proper perspective, and I'm glad that Bishopsgate is doing that.
Yeah, I think Dr. Neal said it best when he said, technology is not going to make a bad teacher any better. So it still has to be used in the right way and in the right hands.
And on a personal note, I wasn't kidding. I think I'd like to have Jordan's data streamed directly. In fact, I'll give you my email address, Dr. Neal. So if you happen to get him on, I'd be more than happy to have his data streamed over my way. I'm sure it would help my game a little bit. Just on a final note, guys, Karen, I'll give you the last final thoughts on what you want to see happen at Bishopsgate from your perspective. Kevin, you as well, and obviously Dr. Neal, we've just heard from you on the technology side. Karen, if you want just some final thoughts before we wrap up.
Well, thank you. It's always good to give the woman the final word, isn't it? Do you know, we just had a young upcoming golf professional come and seek us out today. He wanted to learn more. So he sat in on some of the meetings we had with players, and he looked around the facility, and I had to run off to class, so I really didn't get to talk to him and review the day. And he rang this evening and he said, "That's fantastic. I had such a wonderful time. I think it's great what you're all doing." And I said to him, well, I think it's just the beginning. We're really just getting started. I'm 6 weeks into this position, so I'm really looking forward to what we can all achieve together.
Fantastic. And Kevin, just some final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we've got a great team behind us. People, I have a great team that makes me look good, and we've got an advisory board to really help us, basically build the best program that we possibly can, and help these golfers achieve, hopefully the best of their ability. So I'm just excited about the future and what we can do here.
Well, fantastic. I want to thank all three of you for joining me tonight. Kevin Smeltz, Director of Golf at Bishopsgate Golf Academy, as well as Karen Harrison, the Director of Health and Athletic Development at Bishopsgate, and also Dr. Robert Neal, for Director of Golf BioDynamics. Thank you very much for joining me on Golf Talk Live. An hour seemed to zip by awfully quick, and I wish we had some more time, but I'll get all of you back on here again. And Karen, I sincerely would love to have you come back on and talk about the nutritional side in more depth. I think it's something that a lot of golfers could use some good insight on. But thank you very much for joining me tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been great.
All right, thanks. All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, that was Kevin Smeltz, the Director of Golf at Academy, Bishopsgate Golf Academy, and as well as Karen Harrison, the Director of Health and Athletic Development at BGGA, as well as her husband, Dr. Robert Neal, the Director of Golf BioDynamics, joining me here on Golf Talk Live. We have officially gone off, so we're on the recorded side right now, so I apologize for those of you that noticed it may have ended abruptly. I want to just take a quick thank you again to also thank Pete Buchanan from Plain Simple Golf for joining me this evening on the earlier session of Coach's Corner, special session. Thank you very much, and as well as the other three for joining me a little bit later on in the conversation. Thank you very much, as always, to all the listeners worldwide. Thank you very much for all of the supporters and sponsors, Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide as well, and also for Meredith Kirk from Meredith Kirk Golf, Nikki and Tiffany Litherland for all of their help, Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, Sean Kelly from linkedgolfers.com, and Mr. Peter Doyle from Ireland Doyle Golf Solutions. Thank you very much, as always, for your continued support of the program, and I will see all of you next Thursday right here on Golf Talk Live. Thank you, and God bless everybody.